This is the Jason Walker Show. Two-time National Sports Media Association Montana Sportscaster of the Year and three-time loser, the Jason Walker Show. The best local and statewide sports coverage, featuring the biggest guests from Montana.
Flint Rasmussen joining us here on the Jason Walker Show.
He's freaking exhausting, too. You used to dance a lot more. Yeah, I know, lady. I'm 51 years old now.
The NAI Hall of Famers, Mike Van Diest, joining us here, Jason Walker Show. And is it just a deal where quarterbacks have to be good golfers?
Well, that's all they have time for. They don't work out. They don't lift weights. They don't do anything else. They might as well go get on the golf course and at least have some fun.
And from across the country,
Doug Gottlieb, our guest here on the Jason Walker Show.
End of the day, remember, it's your show. It's got your name on it.
Howie Mandel, our guest here.
Jason Walker, deal or no deal?
the Jason Walker Show, broadcasting from the Major Mortgage Man Cave. Here's Jason Walker.
Welcome to the Jason Walker Show, presented by Capital Collision Center on a finally Friday. It's a tough day in the Major Mortgage Man Cave, as a great friend of ours has passed away. Bruce Parker, the longtime athletic director at Carroll, Rocky, spent time at Montana State as well. And he passed away after battling diabetes, long illnesses. He was 64. He passed away about 1 a.m. this morning with his family by his side. And it's a tough day. Normally we don't do shows on Fridays during the summer, but we decided to do a special show today to commemorate the life of Bruce. And we will talk to Mike Van Diest, Gary Turcott, Bill Lamberty. Rachelle Sayers will join us in a couple of minutes as well. Bruce was a guy that you knew when he was in the room. He was loud, he was brash, he was loyal, he was Bruce. And everybody loved him. And he's going to be missed. There's no question about that. He's in 6 different halls of fame. He is in... he's a legend. And he always will be. But I got the news this morning. Was down in Billings last week. Didn't get a chance to go see him as he was moved into assisted living. And about 12:30 this morning, his family got the call from the nurse, like, "Hey, it's getting close." So he was surrounded by his wife Lisa, who you'll hear a lot about today. His sons, Brett and Ryan, their families, his brother and sister were there as well. Bruce was larger than life in a lot of ways. Gave me a start in 1996 as a PA announcer at Montana State. Did volleyball and was slated to do basketball that year. And then in homecoming of 1996, Montana State played Northern Arizona. And... got a call in that morning from Roger Nelson, who was the football PA guy, and he said, "Man, I can't do it. I got laryngitis, couldn't talk." And I did my first game with Bruce, standing watch, and never looked back. Bruce was an instrumental part of my life. Bruce, like I said, gave me a start in 1996. And I'll never forget that. Came to Helena in 2013, and Bruce was by my side the whole time there. Even after I got let go in 2014, Bruce was adamant about helping get me hired back. He did. I owe him everything for that as well. He retired from Carroll in 2014, went down to Rocky, and... had a lot of success in both Carroll and Rocky. Retired in 2018 officially, and he's going to be missed. There is no question about that. A Billings guy, and just an absolute sweetheart of a man, a teddy bear, really. And we're going to welcome in Coach. Hey, Coach Sayers, are you there? Rachelle Sayers joining us here on the Jason Walker Show. Tough day today, Coach, as we get the news about Bruce Parker. We all knew it was coming, but it's never easy when it happens. Your thoughts?
No, I mean, it was, like you said, I think for a while we've known it's coming. Bruce has been a fighter and a battler and has been through so much. But you just kept feeling like every time, he had one of those, those stays in the hospital or those bad weeks or, that he was just going to bounce back and he'd be back with us. But this time it just didn't happen.
This was a guy that hired you 11 years ago, and a lot of success together at Carroll College in your early days.
I mean, I have so many things to be thankful for one, Bruce giving me my first head coaching job. But, I think Bruce was, he did so much for Carroll College. And for those of us that came in kind of on that tail end of that, we benefited tremendously. I mean, he made Carroll a place that everybody was kind of chasing. Everybody was kind of trying to get to where Carroll was, and people wanted to be a part of that. And, Bruce was a huge reason for that. And so for people like me that came in on the tail end of that, we benefited from it tremendously.
Rachelle Sayers joining us, the Carroll women's basketball coach. So we celebrate the life of Bruce Parker, who passed away this morning at 1 o'clock. He was larger than life. But he was extremely loyal to those that he was closest with, and I'll never forget that. Obviously loyal to you as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I met Bruce first when I was at Weber State, and he was at Montana State, and then through the hiring process, just really, got to know him as a person and understand, what he was about and how much Carroll College meant to him and how much, building Carroll College meant to him. And he was such a part of that. And, I think, from his time at Montana State and Carroll and Rocky and his time in Billings, he just, there's so many people's lives that he touched. And if you ever listen to him do a game or talk at an event, I mean, his stories and his countless memories of things that had happened. I mean, he was one of those guys that did not need a script. As you know, he could get up there and he could put on an entire show and never look down at a piece of paper. I mean, he just had one of those gifts. He shared so many stories with all of us and gave his heart and his time and his passion to Carroll and then to Rocky as well.
What's your favorite story of Bruce?
There's so many. I was trying to think this morning. I actually had a time to visit with Coach Van Diest last night as he and Heidi had headed down to Billings and visited with him about, he was kind of keeping me up to date on how things were going because we're out here in Denver. And, I think, the fondest memories of him are just so, to see him so happy when the student athletes or the coaches had success. I mean, he was the most happy he could be. That was his time, and he just took so much pride in his work and putting together, the coaches that he did and the work he did at the PE Center and the football field. He just took so much pride in seeing that success from the athletes. And I think as the athletes had graduated and come back, I remember the Mike Van Diest retirement at the PE Center and just, him sitting up there and just being Bruce, telling those stories and reliving those moments that he shared with so many athletes and coaches that was when he was at his, height of his game.
Yeah, it's the student athlete was always first for Bruce, and that was unquestionable. Nobody can ever, doubt that. And when he did a game, whether it was, the last few years, covering a Carroll game, he knew everybody. He knew what was going on. It wasn't, even though his eyesight was failing, he could still call a game as well as he did back in the 80s. I mean, this was a guy that he knew the kids, and I think that's what I remember the most is how much he helped everybody.
Well, and I was just talking about that. He did our Frontier Conference championship game. this year.
Yeah.
In March. And, same, just as you said, his eyesight was failing him. He hadn't watched probably as many games as he typically did in a year. But if you're listening to that broadcast, you have no idea. I mean, you think that guy has done every Carroll College, Montana Western game that had been played that year. It was just amazing. I laugh. Probably not my favorite story, but Bruce's favorite story to tell on me was always our first phone call when he asked for Rachel, and I corrected him, Rachelle, and he always laughed because he said, right then and there when she said it's Rachelle, he said, I knew you were our coach because you were, you weren't going to be pushed around. You were going to step right up and take charge. And so he loved that story. He'd tell that all the time about our first conversation.
That's funny you bring that up because when I first got to Carroll, that was one of the first things he said was, it's not Rachel. When you're interviewing her.
But it's Rachelle, and she's going to tell you that.
So I learned early from Bruce how to say your name, so I never got it wrong. He's going to be missed. What's his legacy in the Frontier Conference?
Well, I think, the impact he's had on every school. Like I said, Jason, I think that because he wanted Carroll to be so successful and he put so much into kind of raising the bar for where we're at. And the other schools began to chase that. And because he did that, it improved every other school in our league. Mm-hmm. And then as he moved on to Rocky, you see the nice turf field he was able to get done there. And again, he had that same impact on Rocky Mountain College that he did at Carroll. Then pretty soon you see, their sports teams continuing to do better and the facility improvements and the, the publicity and the corporate sponsorships that they start to develop there at Rocky. And I think, what he did by putting his heart and soul into the programs he was at is he made everybody else around him better because, as you know, in athletics, if you aren't improving, you're losing. You're going to get passed by. And so when he started doing those things at the schools he's at, then everybody else had to step up their game.
And getting the NAI tournament to Billings, where I think it still should be, but the women's tournament, I mean, that was a huge get, and it really showcased the Frontier Conference women's basketball teams.
And probably had the most success of any women's NAI tournament that we've had. Mm-hmm. From a spectator standpoint, from the participation in the community, it was a tremendous event. You're right. I mean, if we didn't have Bruce there in Billings fighting for that and working hard and getting all those people in line to support that, it would have never happened.
Well, I know you're enjoying Denver. We'll let you go, but appreciate the time, Coach. It's always fun to catch up with you, even under these circumstances. But appreciate the comments about Bruce and enjoy Denver.
Well, thank you, Jason, and thanks for making sure that we recognize and remember him in a positive light. Make sure everybody has a chance to know the Bruce that we all did.
Thanks, Coach. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you. All right.
That's Rachelle Sayers, coach at Carroll College, and sharing her memories of Bruce Parker, who passed away today at the age of 64, and he will be missed. We'll take a quick break. We're going to come back. Mike Van Diest will join us. The success of Carroll football, Mike Van Diest, and Bruce Parker kind of go all hand in hand. Bruce liked to take a lot of the credit, and really he deserved a lot of the credit. But we'll talk to Mike Van Diest next here on The Jason Walker Show.
New vehicles keep coming, and Capital Collision Center keeps earning certifications to repair them. They're Helena's newest GM-certified facility. No matter the make or year, they repair your car to manufacturer's standards and requirements, maintaining its safety and value. Montana state law says it's your vehicle and it's your choice where you have it repaired. Choose Capital Collision Center, certified in GM, Subaru, and Nissan, and Helena's only shop certified in Honda, Acura, and Ford. When you value safety, go to Capital Collision Center on Euclid.
Have you thought about buying a home and just don't know where to begin? Well, when it comes to one of the most important purchases one can make, we understand it can be frustrating and confusing, but it doesn't have to be. Let the Major Mortgage team help you with all your mortgage needs. Major Mortgage means major service, and we would love the opportunity to help you today. Give J.R. McFadden, NMLS number 1246357, a call today at 406-465-1918 or you can visit him at 2001 11th Avenue, Building A, Suite 3 in Helena. Major Mortgage is a division of AMCAP Mortgage, NMLS number 129122, equal housing lender. Welcome back. Jason Walker Show, a special edition here on a Friday as we celebrate the life of Bruce Parker, longtime athletics director at Carroll College, Rocky Mountain College, worked at MSU for about a quarter century. A Montanan through and through, even though he was born in Chicago. But we are celebrating the life of Bruce. And when you talk about Bruce Parker and all the halls of fame that he is in, you know, the success of Carroll College and Rocky Mountain College and the Frontier Conference, you know, goes back to really when he got started at Carroll. And it goes hand in hand with Mike Van Diest arriving at Carroll College as well. Coach was a little bit earlier than Bruce. Bruce likes to take a lot of the credit, Coach Mike Van Diest, as we welcome you in. But you guys worked hand in hand together and made Carroll really what it is today.
Well, I think what happened was the timing was right for both of us. You know, I came on board at Carroll College in 1999, and then Bruce came aboard in, you know, in I think the spring or summer of 2003. And there's just a lot of, you know, similarities, I think, between our paths. You know, him being an SID at Montana State, going to work down for Eastman Kodak in Arizona, coming back. Sports was always his livelihood. And I think the timing was right for Carroll College. You know, Gary Turcott had been there for a long time, and Amy Heiser. We joked around that when I interviewed for the job in '99, I was kind of an outsider. I didn't have a Carroll degree. I didn't go to school there. Everybody in the room when I was interviewing that day at lunchtime was with Carroll graduates. You know, and then Bruce came from the outside as well. And it was kind of great at that time because Carroll had so much inbred in terms of, you know, the things that they brought along with Coach Petrino, 28 years with his legacy and success that he has. You know, Coach Trunowski coaching, you know, and then Coach Turcott coaching. And it just seemed to finally find a place for somebody like Bruce to come in at the AD's role and really take the next step and put Carroll College up another notch.
You guys worked obviously so close together and all the championships and all of the great memories, but what is your favorite memory of Bruce that's not really football related and not really championship related?
Just the times he chewed me out on the behind the scenes.
Bruce could never, you can't yell at Mike Van Diest.
Oh no, Bruce. Yeah, Bruce, you know, the thing that Bruce did so well, and it's interesting, Jason, we're having this conversation because Coach Turcott and I talked for a long time this morning about this, is Bruce was a media guy. Bruce loved having a microphone in his hand, and he was good at it. And I think that's what kind of brought him to the forefront, and it also elevated Carroll College because Gary was very successful as a basketball coach at that time prior to Bruce coming. We'd won 3 conference championships and a national championship prior to Bruce coming. But Bruce brought Carroll College in the Frontier Conference and elevated the stature of that program into that national association. You know, we're stuck between Montana State and Montana, but I really believe this for those 10, 11 years that Gary and I were coaching there, and Bruce was on board. You know, Carroll College, we didn't take a back seat to the Big Sky schools in athletics. And a lot of that had to do, I think, we had success in football. We had success in basketball. We had success, you know, in volleyball and women's basketball when Rachelle was hired. But Bruce elevated the whole athletic department in the Carroll College brand, so to speak, before people even thought there was, you know, branding was popular. He brought us up, I think, to the level of the Big Sky schools.
You know, and that's one thing, that is true. I mean, Bruce was a media guy, like you said. He knew how to work the media. But what was great is when I got the job in 2013 and then took over as the voice of Carroll in 2014, you know, Bruce he knew how to help a person. And Bruce has been so instrumental in my career and my success. And it's a big loss. But what he did for the Frontier is absolutely true. And when we took over the radio contract in 2013, and he said, look, we don't want to be backseat, like you said. We want to be on the level of the Cats and the Grizz, and that's what happened. And even before we took over in 2013. But yeah, absolutely. That was, when you talk about football schools in the state of Montana, nobody ever forgets to mention Carroll College because of Bruce.
Well, and I think that's the important thing, your relationship and friendship with him, and John Lagerquist as well. And Bruce was right in the middle of that. Bruce loved doing, being the color guy, with you guys on play-by-play. He loved being on the radio with Gary Turcott, with John, with you. That's what he was great at. He did so many other things well, too. Corporate sponsorship and fundraising, elevating that part of it, and helping the coaches out in our department. But Bruce, behind the scene, behind that microphone, and him and Steve D and Marty Lyons getting, television and getting football and basketball, Frontier Conference as well, and certainly Carroll College got a lot of the prime times, but getting us on television around the state. That was big in those days, and that's something that, hasn't been replicated since then or duplicated since then, I guess is a better word. And I just feel like, Frosty Westerland at PLU always said the big time is where you're at. And I think Gary believed that. I believe that as a coach, and certainly Bruce brought that in as an athletic director at the time.
Mike Van Diest joining us. He's a Hall of Famer like Bruce was, and it's eerie how your guys' careers just went so similar. And I mentioned it at the beginning of our chat, but I remember, and Coach Rachelle Sayers just talked about this too a few minutes ago, was the night of your celebration at Carroll College. I mean, Bruce just sat there and talked. He had no script. He just went as Bruce did, and it was as great of a night as it was focused on you. Bruce really, I mean, he was Bruce, and I don't know what else to say about that night. He was just, this is Bruce. He's talking. This is his element. This is where he's most comfortable.
Well, and he did. He was at the forefront, as you said. He's in numerous Hall of Fames, but he always gave coaches credit, and he knew the hard work that coaches put in, and that's unusual for an AD that never coached. Sometimes you're working for ADs, and then for me, actually, a guy never coached football. It was great being at the University of Wyoming when Joe Tiller was there, the head coach, because Paul Roach, the ex-head coach at Carroll College, or at University of Wyoming, was the ex-football coach. And that kind of goes hand in hand. And selfishly, as a football coach, you want an AD that's a football guy. But Bruce understood the importance of football, whether it's at Montana State or at Carroll College or at Rocky. And that's not to slight anything else, because he was a big, big fan of Gary Turcott. And he hired Rachelle Sayers, which was a great hire. That's something I think Bruce can really hang his hat on. And he brought in a future Hall of Famer in Rachelle.
Well, and you look at the sports that were added at Carroll, the softball, the men's soccer, the 8 different sports. I mean, track and field, as successful as Harry Clark has been building that, it's if not for Bruce, maybe there is no track and field at Carroll and cross country. But what an amazing legacy and an impact, not only on the Frontier Conference, Coach, but also nationwide. When you look at, like I said, the NAI Hall of Fame, but this is a guy that elevated the entire Frontier, not just Carroll or Rocky later in the years, but the entire conference. It had to be thought of as a nationwide powerhouse because of Bruce and what he did.
Well, and that's the great thing about it, because of Bruce, his dynamic personality, so to speak, and how much he put into athletics. He knew the importance of it. Even at the NAI level, when he got into the national committees across the country in the NAI, we were at the forefront. We had a spokesman for the Frontier Conference, and we had a guy at the table and pounding the table for us. And it wasn't just the council of presidents. We had an athletic director in the form of Bruce Parker, who got up there and pounded the table and said, "Look where we're at, and these are the things that are successful in the Frontier Conference, and these are the sports we want to highlight." And when I came in, everything was in the Midwest and the South. Football-wise, basketball-wise, whatever. That's where the NEI, strength and stronghold was. And finally, we got somebody like Bruce, and when he goes along with it, Gary took his team to this Elite 8 in the Final Four. And we had our success on the field, certainly when Bruce was there and prior to Bruce. But Bruce knew how to take advantage of that and get us on the national scene.
Coach, when you look at where Carroll College is, and even, we'll throw in Rocky as well, because he had success there too. But the fundraising, the corporate sponsorship is anywhere in the Frontier close without Bruce Parker being in the conference?
No, I think, what Bruce did and what the coaches did, they elevated it. So the whole conference, and I'm not saying this on a soapbox, but everybody had to step up and say, okay, this is how we want to be. And when Bruce went to Rocky, he did the same thing. And obviously getting the women's NAI National Basketball Tournament brought to Billings, Bruce was the lead dog in that. He's the one that got that going. And he had the mindset, we can do this. And Billings is a great community to do this, which it's the population. And, this is how it came to be. But the corporate sponsorship at Carroll and the fundraising for Bruce, and that was something that, Bruce knew how I was. Bruce never talked to me on Friday or Saturday during the season. He knew that how I was locked in. And there's other things I had to do, and I didn't want to know about what was going to happen in the playoffs or what was going to happen on home advantage and who was going to put a bid in. Bruce and Renee Wall did all that behind the scenes. And that was great because as a coach, then you could concentrate on coaching and you didn't take a distraction from somewhere else. And, Bruce took care of that, whether it was getting the charter planes to go play in the playoffs or the national championship game or securing the home field advantage and home field bid during the NAI playoffs. And, that's big time. Those are things that, somebody has to step up and do that. And I don't know that everybody can do that. It's part of your job description, but Bruce embraced that and did it. And whether it was going out and getting corporate sponsorship, talking to boosters, talking to families and parents, they were on board with it because Bruce was the lead. He was the lead in that every single year.
I think his love for the student athlete too is something that we can never forget.
Right. A lot of them came in and did internships with him, whether it was work study or whatever. And I think some of these young people, whether it's a Matt Thomas going on and being associate AD at Boise State, Patrick Cosina later on got just a taste of that with Bruce, and he's doing a great job at the University of Nebraska and will be an athletic director someday. But so many of these young people, because at a small school, your student athletes have to be work study, whether it's at the front desk taking ticket requests, whether they're working the gates on game day or whatever it is. Bruce is kind of overseeing all that. So they have to come into that circle with Bruce. And certainly one of the biggest events, I think, the social events in the city of Helena at the time. I don't know what it still is now, but during those 10 or 11 years, one of the biggest social events, as you know, was the States Athletic Association fundraiser in the spring and the States Athletic Auction. And, Bruce, and beside Bruce is right there was Lisa Parker. And
yeah, that was my next question was we can't forget about Lisa and the work that Lisa behind the scenes, as Heidi knows this, Mrs. Van Diest knows this as a coach's wife, you're on the road a lot, you're at the office a lot, and Lisa understood that. But, the work that she did helping Bruce over the last really decade with his health declining the last half decade, she is a saint and a wonderful lady. She gave up her career to help Bruce live as long as he could.
Well, she was always there. At any event that we had, she was there. Whether it was a Christmas party with the staff and they had us over to their house, she was always in charge of that. Whether during the summer months, whether it was football or basketball or track and field, whatever athlete stayed in town, they'd always have a taco night, dessert night, and invite that team or that group of coaches up there to their house, to feed them. And just little things like that, you're not looking for a headline in the IR anywhere, but they were behind the scenes. I know how that goes because I know the hard work and the love that Lisa put in that, but I know it's personally with Heidi and the things that they have to take care of at home when we're on the road, when we're out recruiting or Bruce is out fundraising. I've seen a number of coaches. I've worked with coaches everywhere whose wives aren't like that. And I see coaches that are unhappy or disgruntled or they fan out, they phase out. But between Heidi and Lisa Parker, we were very blessed to have that. Steve Jones had that with Pam Jones, his career that we just celebrated a while ago. So the wives, they're part of the family. And I think that's what makes it go is that your family's a part of it. And that Bruce has a son that's a soccer coach, or a college soccer coach. So they grew up around that and they embraced that lifestyle for sure. And I told Heidi, I said, you did what you just said. Lisa was a great caretaker, Bruce, and she's a saint. So I told Heidi, I said, make sure you're taking notes on it. I'm getting up there in age, and I said, make sure you're watching Lisa when she's doing it.
Well, and it's funny too because Lisa's not a big lady, and Bruce was not a small dude, and the way she was able to really manhandle him the last few years was remarkable.
She never backed down. He could bark at her, she didn't bark back. She just knew how Bruce was, and she would listen. And she had that quiet voice, but she always had a smile. And then she would go about her business, and Bruce knew when to back off. At a time, it wasn't the coach he was talking to. That was Lisa, but she was wonderful, and how she headed up things, and she was just around the office, and she loved it. And that's what was great to see. I just the memories we have of Bruce, and I'll always take with Bruce. Lisa will be right there in my memory bank too.
100%. Coach, I know you're with family up at the lake. We appreciate the time.
We're just enjoying the water and the sunshine.
It is nice. It is a very nice day. Appreciate the time. We'll see you Tuesday at the memorial service for sure, the celebration of life down there in Billings. But appreciate it, Coach, for joining us on short notice, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, you and your family enjoy the 4th and stay safe, and we'll see you Tuesday morning. Thanks, Jason.
Sounds good. Thanks, Coach. That is Mike Van Diest joining us here on the Mike Miller State Farm Hotline as we share memories of Bruce Parker. And, those that may not have known Bruce, you definitely heard of Bruce. You knew who he was. And we're reaching out to another Hall of Fame coach right now as
Hey, Jason.
Hey, Coach. We're live on the Jason Walker Show. Coach Gary Turcott joining us. And I just got off the phone with Mike Van Diest, and he was sharing some stories that you and him had talked about Bruce Parker, who passed away this morning at the age of 64. But your initial thoughts when you heard the news today?
Well, I guess I was not shocked. His health had been deteriorating for a number of years. He dodged old Dr. Death a number of times. He was a tough guy, and he had a very, very strong will to live. And he, a kidney transplant, a couple of years where he was having to take dialysis. I mean, that is tough stuff. But he survived a long time, and he was working this fall. He was still broadcasting games. That was his passion, and it kept him alive a long time.
He did the Frontier Women's Championship in March. I mean, this was a guy that he just
That's right.
He knew everything about the Frontier and its players, even now, even though he's been retired for a couple of years. But we're talking to Gary Turcott, Carroll College Hall of Famer. You guys, you had been at Carroll a long time before Bruce came in, Coach, and what did he do to really help the men's basketball program even more so succeed than it already had been?
Well, he was the 4th athletic director that I worked under. He was the one that I worked under the longest. Bruce had a special talent for media, for public relations. He was a brilliant broadcaster. Probably people don't know that Brent Musburger had, when Bruce was a young man in Billings, Brent Musburger was a Billings guy himself. Mm-hmm. And he had spotted Bruce and his talent and wanted Bruce to come to Chicago and get into a bigger media market. Bruce had married Lisa at a young age. I think they already had one of their babies. And he just didn't think he could leave and live that lifestyle with a young family. But that was Bruce's genius, was the media. He really upgraded every aspect in the Frontier Conference, not just at Carroll, but at every school. That was what he was the most competent, the best that he did. He was able to bring Carroll into the popular mode, especially around the state and out of state as well. At the NEI level, mm-hmm. That's what he loved to do, and he was good at it.
We're joined by Gary Turcott on the Mike Miller State Farm Hotline, and I shared with Mike Van Diest one of my favorite stories was when we took over the radio contract at Montana Radio Company, and then I got over I got the job with when John Lagerquist retired, right about the same time Bruce did from Carroll and went to Rocky. But he said in 2013, look, I've been to the Big Sky, he's been to the Big Sky, we know how to work together. But he said, let's elevate Carroll to that next level. And he had that innate ability to know that that's really what it was about is, don't take the back seat to the Big Sky Conference schools. There's no reason the Frontier shouldn't stand front and center as well.
Well, that's well put. I think that was how he approached it. And then, during those years, we were winning national football championships, year after year. And he wasn't afraid to tell people about it. And he did a great job of bringing that to the forefront of the state. And he got involved in the leadership at the NAI level. He was on committees back there. He made trips back to the annual conferences. He got his input in. He was involved in decision making. And Carroll, was more respected because of some of the work that he did.
Gary Turcott, our guest here, Jason Walker Show, as we celebrate the life of Bruce Parker, who passed away this morning, multiple diseases. But Coach, when you look back at the days, Carroll was successful already in football when Bruce came in. Carroll men's basketball and women's basketball had some success too. But then you look at what he did in those 11 years, track and field, and hiring Harry Clark, Aaron Jackson in softball, Rachelle Sayers in women's basketball, men's soccer with Doug Mello. There's a tremendous amount of success at Carroll that really elevated the rest of the Frontier too in those other sports.
Well, he did. We did have a lot of sports there. One thing I think that I don't know that Bruce would even realize this, but I was thinking about it this morning. When he got there, things were in good shape, and he didn't screw it up. And a lot of athletic directors come in there and they want to put their own brand on everything. They want to bring in this and they want to bring in that, and they want to let this guy go, and they want to change the way things are done. We were successful when Bruce got there, and he didn't hurt that situation. Right. If anything, he enhanced the success that we already had.
Coach, I talked to Coach Van Diest about this, and with your wife Donna, who's an angel. Coach knows this with Mrs. Van Diest. Coach Sayers knows it with her husband. Coach's spouses, it's never easy during season. Off season is getting just as bad, but Bruce had a wife in Lisa Parker who understood what Bruce's job was. She was there by his side until the very end. But she understood what her role was to help the student athletes at both Carroll and Rocky as well. And there's not enough positive adjectives to describe Lisa Parker as well.
I think that's a really good point, Jason, that you bring out. And I hope people do recognize, we call her Saint Lisa for what she did, especially the last years of Bruce's life where his health was really deteriorating and he was so totally dependent on her. And she really gave up so much of her life in order to be at his side. But even before that, I think you bring up a good point that even when he was in the full bloom of health in those Carroll years, Lisa was right there. She was really good on the computer, road trips. She provided directions. She programmed the maps. She coordinated the phone calls. She was like an assistant athletic director, personal secretary, and spouse as well. And my respect has no end for how she stood by her man especially the last 5-6 years have been tough years.
Oh, and there's no question about that. Okay, give me Coach Van Diest's memory was all the times Bruce yelled at him, which is strange because nobody yells at Mike Van Diest, except maybe Heidi. But what's your favorite memory of working with Bruce?
Well, there were certainly some funny things that he did. Some times that he did have a temper, and he would lose his temper. But my memory of Bruce, when I want to think of a positive about Bruce, I'm going to think of the pregame football show, and this is right before you came on board to do the football, Jason. And I was doing the football with John Lagerquist, and Bruce Parker at the football games did a half-hour pregame show all by himself. He would stand over there on at the end of the southwest end zone with the microphone in his hand, all by himself, no notes. Mm-hmm. And he would do the pregame show, a half hour, and nothing was recorded. It was just him. And he would just talk about the football game, the coaches, the players, the people, for a half hour. And sometimes somebody would come by and he would say hello and talk about them, or, the offensive line would come by as they were coming in to get warmed up and he would talk about them. But that's when I really realized, this is a guy that had a gift, and his gift was broadcasting in the media. That's what he loved. That's what he was good at. That's how I'll remember him.
We'll see you Tuesday down at the service in Billings at Herb Clint Field. Coach, we appreciate the time on short notice. And there's so many more memories and stories to tell of Bruce, and those will be shared on Tuesday as well, I'm sure. But thanks for joining us, and we'll see you Tuesday, and travel safe.
Thank you, Jason.
That is Gary Turcott, the Carroll Hall of Fame coach, joining us here on the Jason Walker Show. What an amazing career he had, and a lot of that coincided with Bruce Parker being at Carroll College as well. We're making one more phone call here as we.
Hello.
Hey, Bill. Welcome. Let me give you the full introduction as we get live here on the Mike Miller State Farm Hotline. Bill Lamberty, Sports Information Director at Montana State, joining us. We've talked a lot about Carroll today, so forgive me. But Bill Lamberty worked with Bruce Parker and for a long time. Give me your first thoughts when you found out the news this morning that Bruce had passed away.
Well, I'd heard for the last few days that people that had gone over to visit had found him basically unresponsive. So it kind of felt like the time was coming, but it was just really sad, and give me a chance to think about a lot of the memories with Bruce and the times we spent together. And heck, Bruce hired me here at MSU, so it even though it seemed sort of inevitable the last few days, it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks when news came.
We were in Billings Saturday celebrating the Montana Football Hall of Fame and talked with each other down there. But, Bruce would have loved to have been there, but that was the day he got moved back into assisted living. And, the prayers, I mean, when Tuff gave the pastor Tuff, gave his pre-meal speech or benediction, I mean, that was just like, and thoughts to Bruce and his family and what a special moment that was. But I mean, there's so many memories, and you and I have something in common, Bill. I mean, Bruce gave me my first start as PA announcer doing volleyball in 1996 during the August volleyball tournament. And then, of course, with football and basketball over the years. But what an amazing man, what an amazing career he had when you go back to the Eastern Montana days, Eastern Montana College, to Eastman Kodak, MSU. And he really elevated so much the student athlete, really.
Yeah, if you start trying to process all the people whose lives he positively touched, it's really pretty incredible. And that really, even just thinking about his time at Montana State, which was just a little bit over half his time in college athletics, it's a great testament to what he was all about and how he lived his life and how he approached every day. I mean, he just was always a high energy guy, and a lot of that was the Mountain Dew he pounded, but a lot of it was just his great nature, very good natured guy, and just so many laughs and smiles with him along the way that it's, and they haven't done nearly a good enough job keeping in touch with him these last few years, but he was a very impactful person.
You look back at those, the 90s when he was at Montana State. Football was not a success, but he never stopped believing really in the student athlete, like I said. But he loved everywhere he was, whether it was MSU, Carroll, Rocky. It was weird seeing him in purple and gold, and then it was really weird seeing him in green when he went to Rocky. But this was a guy that loved everywhere he was, and everybody loved him back.
Well, he even had great stories to tell about his few months at Eastern Washington, and I know the people there, Dick Zorns, Dave Cook, who replaced him there as sports information director, really had great fondness for Bruce for all these years. And so, yeah, you're right about that. He was a beloved guy everywhere he went, and that's really evident in all the awards and the honors. And those things are great, but what they say about him and about a person who piles those up like that, I think is the important thing.
What's your favorite story of Bruce?
Well, I'll go back to the very beginning. I drove into town on Thursday. I want to say it was October 18th, 1990, and went right to Bruce's office, which was down on the right off the Circle Drive down there in sort of the ground floor of the field house, and said my hellos, and we got settled in, and it was probably 4:15, 4:30 in the afternoon. I was staying at his house that night, so we took my stuff to his place, dropped that off, and then we had to go and get some dinner. And for anybody who knows Bruce well, we went to Taco Bell, and that and one of the great stories was one I heard I think that weekend from Rip Cook. When I met Rip, he told me a story about Bruce being at Western Illinois, or no, Rip being at Western Illinois with the Bobcats filming a game, and they drove by a Taco Bell with the flag at half staff, and somebody said, "Oh no, somebody better check on Bruce." And so the stories about Taco Bell, and so we went to Taco Bell, and then he took me to a bachelor auction that night at the Old Elks Club on Mendenhall. And so my whole first night in Bozeman was the full Bruce Parker experience. It was just great. Like I said before, tons of laughs and great stories. And all these years later, I remember those first few hours in Bozeman, and stayed with Bruce that weekend and worked my first football game, and lots of ups and downs that week, and for the whole time, but still great memories with Bruce and just a ton of laughs.
Bill Lamberty joining us, Montana State Sports Information Director. We've talked a lot about his wife, Lisa, and the work that she has done, being by his side from day one, and really the last half decade with his illnesses. But, she is a true saint. And, without Lisa, I don't know if Bruce had gone this long.
Yeah, I think that's entirely true. She certainly, stood by his side, but I think in a lot of ways was the, kind of stood behind him and kept him going through these last few years. But I also know that, even from the very earliest time I met those guys, that just such a positive person. I mean, you can't come across Lisa in any realm without feeling better about things. And so I know that she was just a huge energy giver and a huge positive influence on him and Brett and Ryan and, the whole family for sure. But I know that you could always sort of trace his great energy and demeanor, at least partially back to Lisa.
We're talking with Bill Lamberty here about the legacy of Bruce Parker, who passed away early this morning, after battling some illnesses. But where is Montana State without Bruce?
Well, I think that, you alluded to it. We really struggled in the 90s getting things going in football, and a couple of close calls, close on a few occasions. But Bruce was just such an engine. And he drove everything. And when there was a problem, and we talk about people Bruce influenced, the guy that sort of in ways, not necessarily in lineage of job responsibilities, but in ways took over for Bruce was Josh Vanego. And in that, those two guys, when you needed something done, they would just get it done. And they didn't ask if it was in their job description, and they didn't ask, how and who's going to, who gets billed for this. They just went out and got something donated, figured out a way to get a weight platform built or whatever. And so I think in the late 90s when we were trying to get the stadium renovated, or mid 90s, and then after that we were trying to get things done that would really promote tailgating and the game day experience. Bruce was always right in the middle of all those discussions. He always had ideas. Not all of them were great. Not many of them even got enacted, but just driving that conversation and being relentless about trying to get this thing turned around. And he and I remember a conversation once. We talked about how cool it would be to block off the street in front of Kagi Boulevard in front of the stadium on game days. And it wasn't even a concept. It was sort of an offhand comment. And I remember he brought that to a full staff meeting when I think it was maybe Peter Field's first full staff meeting. And I think maybe President would have been President Gamble in the Hall of Fame room. And Bruce brought that idea up, and by golly, within a year he had made that a reality. And that's just really emblematic of how he got things done. And not everything was a straight line, and not everything was easy or efficient. But he just really drove things forward all the time.
When I look back at my early days, at Montana State, which started in '96 with the PA announcing, but this was a guy who understood media. This was a guy that understood fundraising, and a guy that understood community. And when he said, I don't know, Bill, if I've met anybody more loyal than Bruce Parker.
Yeah, he's amazing that way. And I don't know, Jason, have you ever walked into any room in any setting or situation with him that he didn't know somebody or somebody knew him?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, he was amazing that way. And so think of what a great asset that is in this state. And, I believe that Carroll College probably saw that in him when they hired him. And I believe that Rocky Mountain probably was very excited to capture that when they brought him home to Billings. And, but I know in the decade of the 90s when I was with him here that he was just really, really good about connecting with people. And I think that's going to be very evident these next few difficult days as, we all come to grips with it. But, man, what a guy.
What's his overall legacy in your eyes?
Well, just the stories we'll hear from people and how many people he helped and how many people he connected with. But I think specific to Montana State, like you said, it's an incredible, array of skills and an incredibly broad perspective that he could bring to things, with his background as a student athlete, but then as an SID, and he had his feet in the corporate world for a little while. And, so just my time with him here, which is just an absolute blessing, he was always somebody who could offer perspective that certainly I wouldn't have had as a younger guy, but even now he just has great perspective and was really always, really always trying to improve things. I think that, to me, that's his legacy, is just his commitment to making things better and to connecting with people.
It's amazing the impact, like you said earlier, that how many people's lives has he touched not only in the frontier, the big sky, and just everybody who knew Bruce is a better person for knowing Bruce.
Yeah, and what's amazing, when you think about it, is that except for 2 years that he spent between Corpus Christi and then back in Cheney, he spent his whole career, really his whole adult life in Montana. And man, you just, he really he from the day I met him, he transcended the Bobcat Grizzlies thing. And that's a very difficult thing to do when you've only been on one side of this rivalry. And he, I think, probably people would say that, in the Frontier conferences, that he wasn't just a Carroll College guy or a Rocky Mountain guy. He could, sort of zoom out, get a bigger perspective on things, and probably really offer worthwhile opinions on a huge number of topics.
Was it fun when he came back to do games?
Oh, I always enjoyed seeing Bruce. Yeah, for sure. It was, it was always great. And we brought him back to a football game in the playoff game in 2019. I mean, it was, that was really almost the only way I'd ever see him between my work schedule and his is, if he was going to come work a game. So I always looked forward to that. And part of it was Lisa was going to be there. So that was always great. And, just, he had just a great gift when you ran into him, regardless of the setting. It was, you hadn't missed a beat, whether it had been a week or 10 years since you'd seen him. There was always a commonality with him, and he just was so good at, just being real, as people say.
I used the phrase earlier today, but he was a teddy bear, because if he loved you, you knew it. And there was, you had to give Bruce a hug whenever you saw him, especially the last few years. But when he left Carroll, yeah, it was, like I said, it was weird seeing him in the green of Rocky, but he was a giant teddy bear who loved people.
Yeah, he really, from the very earliest moments I knew him, that was just so obvious that it was, every time he met someone for the first time, it was going to be, maybe not every time, but it was always going to be a positive experience. There was going to be positive energy, and things, he mellowed over the years, and obviously his health situation probably altered his perspective, and certainly, that of those around him. But it was always fun and always just positive.
Bill Lamberty joining us. A couple of final ones for you, but what I relate to Bruce a lot too is my early days at MSU, and then I had kids and a previous wife, but the family atmosphere, and then you go to Carroll, and then when I get there, and my son Bob was in 7th or 8th grade, and Bruce goes, "This kid's going to be running all over the place like he did at MSU," and it's true, because Bruce lets families and let families in, and they became part of that family, whether it was MSU or Carroll or Rocky. And I think that's one thing that really needs to be not forgotten is if Bruce loved you and the kids, then you were in forever.
Yeah. And that I'm sure had everything to do with his family, because Lisa and Brett and Ryan meant everything to him. And so, they were always around. Lisa was always at MSU functions and games and so on. And Brett and Ryan were a little bit older by the time I showed up, but it was, it was very obvious. Family was everything to him, and not just, like you said, not just his family, people's families. He always had an interest in what other people's. I don't think I ever talked to him, that he didn't ask what my kids were up to, and so. It was always like that with him from the very beginning.
Hey, we appreciate the stories. We'll see you Tuesday down in Billings, I'm sure, at the celebration of life at Herb Clint Field. But do you know anybody else that is in 6 Halls of Fame?
No.
4 schools in Montana and then 2 national ones.
It's crazy. I mean, that's just insane. But like I said at the beginning, that, and the awards, all the awards, all that stuff is, at the end of the day, it's meaningless except what it tells you about him.
Yep.
And that is that he did good work, but mostly he just did good.
Hey, it's always good to chat with you. Can't wait to talk on more upbeat terms next time, but appreciate the memories of Bruce. And like I said, we'll see you Tuesday down in Billings.
Okay, Jason, thanks very much.
Thank you, Bill. That is Bill Lamberty joining us here on the Mike Miller State Farm Hotline as we get set to wrap things up here. But as we celebrate the life of a true sports legend in the state of Montana and really nationwide, Bruce Parker, 6 Halls of Fame. And it's tough. It is tough. It's never easy. You knew it was coming. And at the same time, when you get that news early in the morning, it's not an easy text to read or a call to take or an email to read. Bruce Parker touched many, many lives. And, you know, I've known him. I first met Bruce in the mid-'80s with midget football, and Bruce was involved in youth sports as well. It wasn't just, you know, college athletics, but college athletics lost a true pioneer today in the passing of Bruce Parker. We are all better for knowing who Bruce was. Our condolences out to Lisa, Brett, Ryan, the family of Bruce Parker. And the family goes beyond the immediate family. The extended family of Bruce Parker is everyone who has met him. And you heard the stories with Rachelle Sayers, Mike Van Diest, Gary Turcott, Bill Lamberty, Eastman Kodak. And then he comes back, Eastern Washington, then Montana State. And the things Bruce did for MSU and the Big Sky back in the 90s. And then Carroll and Rocky and the entire Frontier Conference and the entire NAI owes Bruce a debt of gratitude, because what he was able to accomplish and get done is unparalleled. Bruce will be missed. There's nobody better than Bruce Parker. We love you. We're going to miss you. Godspeed, Bruce, and your family. The memorial service, Celebration of Life, will be Tuesday down at Herb Clinton Field in Billings, where it all got started, a Billings senior grad. And you've read all the stories. You've heard all the accolades. And we talked about it here on the show. The loyalty of Bruce Parker is unmatched. There'll never, in my mind, be an athletic director in the Frontier Conference that cared or cares more than Bruce did about the student athlete, about the coaches, and about his friends. And when you met Bruce, you immediately became part of his family, his extended family, which reaches from shore to shore. Hope you've enjoyed this last hour talking about the legacy and the life of Bruce Parker, because nobody's better. We love Bruce. We're going to miss him. If you get the chance, 10 o'clock Tuesday, Herb Clinton Field, celebrate the life of Bruce. And in lieu of flowers, he's asked to donate to scholarships for student athletes. Montana State, MSU Billings, Rocky, Carroll. We love you, Bruce. Rest in peace, my friend.